In 1982, years before the World Wide Web, French households could already search a directory, read information, send messages, book tickets, check bank services, and shop through a screen. The machine was called Minitel. It looked like a small beige computer terminal with a keyboard, but it was connected to the telephone network and backed by France's national telecommunications system. The clever decision was not only technical, it was about distribution. An online service is useless when almost nobody owns the equipment required to reach it. France solved that problem by placing terminals in homes as an alternative to printing huge telephone directories. A user dialed a service, connected the terminal, entered a short code, and navigated pages made from simple text and blocky graphics. Businesses could create services without persuading every customer to buy a personal computer first. That made Minitel useful while home computing was still expensive and confusing. It created an early digital marketplace. People used electronic directories, train reservations, banking, shopping, news, messaging, and chat. Service charges could be collected through the telephone bill, anticipating paid online platforms. But Minitel's strength became its limit. It was a national, controlled system built around specialized terminals and telephone infrastructure. The Internet expanded through general-purpose computers, open standards, faster connections, and services that could reach the whole world. As web access became normal, Minitel increasingly looked like a successful future trapped inside an older network. France finally shut the service in 2012. Minitel did not become the global internet. It did something more revealing. It proved that ordinary people would search, communicate, buy, and manage daily life online long before the browser made those behaviors universal. That is the short version of the Minitel story. To understand why it mattered, we need to slow down and examine the entire system around it: the operator, the mechanism, the infrastructure, the economics, the social habits, the transition, the exceptions, and the legacy. Start with the human routine. Minitel solved the adoption problem by distributing access terminals before most households were willing to purchase personal computers. The important comparison is not between human labor and a machine in isolation, but between two complete routines. A product earns a place in daily life when it removes decisions, interruptions, and opportunities for error as well as physical effort. Notice who begins the task, who watches it, who corrects it, and who cleans up afterward. Those quiet obligations often explain adoption better than a specification sheet. A faster mechanism can still feel slow when it repeatedly calls a person back into the process. Now look closely at the mechanism. Replacing printed telephone directories gave the network an immediate practical reason to enter ordinary homes. A mechanism can appear simple after it becomes familiar. Yet its design fixes a chain of choices about timing, force, feedback, and control. Those choices determine what the operator must still notice and what the product can safely decide by itself. The useful question is where judgment lies. It may sit in a lever, a gauge, a physical stop, a warning sound, or the practiced senses of the user. Later designs often look smarter because they move more of that judgment inside the product. The third layer is infrastructure. Short service codes and telephone billing reduced the friction of finding a provider, connecting, and paying for digital information. Objects do not spread on engineering merit alone. They rely on power, communications, roads, plumbing, retail, repair, standards, or trained workers. When that supporting network changes, The same object can move from essential to inconvenient without changing its physical form. Infrastructure is easiest to notice when it is missing. Once it becomes reliable, designers can assume it exists and remove features that once compensated for uncertainty. The next generation then appears simpler only because more complexity has moved out of sight. There is also an economic question. The system let messaging, reservations, banking, shopping, directories, and paid services develop inside one national infrastructure. Buyers compare more than the price on the day of purchase. They also absorb time, maintenance, supplies, training, risk, and the cost of keeping an older system alive. A replacement becomes persuasive when the total burden shifts. Even if the original product still works, that burden is distributed unevenly. The purchaser, operator, repairer, employee, and family member may each experience a different cost. A successful product can therefore win by solving the problem of the person who makes the decision, even when another person performs the work. The social meaning matters too. Its controlled design produced consistency and trust, but it also limited the openness and global reach that later defined the web. Everyday products signal expectations about speed, cleanliness, status, privacy, responsibility, and skill. People may accept an awkward device when it represents progress, or abandon a capable one when its rituals begin to feel out of step with ordinary life. Advertising can amplify that shift, but it does not create it alone. Friends, workplaces, shops, and public institutions teach people what normal use looks like. Once the new behavior becomes ordinary, the old routine can seem demanding even to someone who once performed it without complaint. Replacement rarely happens in a single moment. General-purpose computers eventually made a dedicated terminal less attractive because one machine could run software and reach worldwide networks. Old and new systems overlap while prices fall, habits adjust, and supporting services reorganize. During that interval, decline can look slow. Once the surrounding network tips toward the replacement, however, the remaining market can contract with surprising speed. This is why a date of invention rarely marks a clean beginning, and a date of discontinuation rarely marks a clean end. The useful timeline follows access, affordability, confidence, and repeated use. Those changes can lag behind the laboratory by years or decades. The surviving exceptions are revealing. Minitel users rehearsed online habits years before browsers made those behaviors familiar elsewhere. A product that disappears from the mainstream can remain valuable in places with different constraints. Survival is evidence that design is always conditional. Convenience for one household or business may be fragility, waste, or unnecessary complexity for another. These holdouts are not simply people trapped in the past. They can be rational users optimizing for control, durability, independence, familiarity, or low operating cost. Looking at the exceptions protects the history from becoming a simple story in which every newer product is automatically better. Finally, consider the legacy. The service shows that digital revolutions depend on distribution, payment, useful services, and public confidence as much as raw computing power. The most durable inheritance is often not the object itself but the behavior it normalized. Later products can hide the same task behind software, sensors, or a larger network, making yesterday's visible mechanism difficult to recognize inside today's routine. To find that inheritance, follow the promise rather than the shape. Ask what uncertainty the product removed, what action it made repeatable, and what expectation it taught users to carry forward. The casing may vanish while the promise becomes an invisible standard for everything that follows. Taken together, these layers explain why the Minitel was neither a foolish dead end nor an inevitable step toward the present. It was a practical answer to one historical arrangement of labor, technology, cost, and expectation. Its rise shows what people urgently needed at that moment. Its decline shows which surrounding conditions changed. And its legacy survives wherever a newer product quietly performs the same job with fewer visible steps. That is why ordinary relics deserve more than nostalgia. They reveal the hidden systems inside everyday life.